We define the world from the languages we use. So my language is different to the language of somebody who really doesn't see the mysteries of the twin slit experiment, doesn't see the incredible curiosities that they're now discovering in quantum mechanics. The idea that, we have entangled particles that can communicate over vast areas of distance. These things are impossible within our present scientific model. That is a fact. And yet you'll talk to many scientists these days, and they just simply do not accept these things. I mean, Einstein started the ball rolling, and he spent the second half of his life trying to pull back the logic of what he changed by his work. He simply couldn't accept the Copenhagen interpretation, the statistical interpretation of reality. He couldn't believe that everything was a statistical chance. A particle is in one place or another, depending on where you look. These kind of things. But the irony is now some of the work that's being done in quantum computing, which they're now starting to develop quantum computers, actually works upon the idea that you statistically do not know where a particle is until you observe it. And indeed, there's one fascinating thing that, you have a particle, it could be inside a box, but there is an infinitesimal chance particle may be outside of the box, not inside. And this kind of philosophy is what's being used in quantum computing. The idea that there will be a trillionth of a chance that one particle will not be located where it should be. And this is how quantum computing is working. We are in a very, very exciting time in terms of science. And I always say to people, don't poo-poo these things. It's like a huge circle. These things are meeting. You talk to some of the particle physicists and the quantum mechanical physicists that are working within these fields, people like Anton Zeilinger and such like, and David Deutsch, these guys, and Max Tegmark. These guys are working in fields that are as close to philosophy as they are to science. Because what are the philosophical implications of the particle coming to existence by the act of observation? What does that say about consciousness? And indeed, can consciousness be explained as a quantum function? There's a guy, Roger Penrose, and a guy called Stuart Hamerhoff have been working on this for quite a few years, saying that actual thought and consciousness are quantum events. So in which case, what we see in quantum physics is how thought works. Now, isn't that an amazing concept? So in which case, what we see around all created by the mind using quantum effects.
We are in an amazing time. There's so much going on. And we're going to have to open up the way that we perceive reality. There are too many there are too many people giving testimony, if you will, of such phenomenon of consciousness, of, emerging with different realities, realities laying on top of ours and linking into ours and seeing and experiencing so many things all at once. This cannot be a coincidence. This is, how I see it. And we're going to have to open up our perception. We're not going to have a choice.
No, I agree, we're not. And the thing is that there are too many black swans out there, things that don't fit in. But again, I think you've made a very, very important point there, that too many people have these experiences. Now, in my point of view, you can take these one of two ways. You can either conclude that these people are either misguided, they're misinterpreting things around them, they're lying, or they're exaggerating. That is possible. But there are too many people I meet who have had extraordinary things happen to them. The difficulty is that we can't, within our reductionist scientific model, whereby for something to exist, it has to be repeated, it has to be observed, and it has to be observed again and again in order to be real, means that we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We have so much evidence that is telling us that reality is not quite what it seems. Now we know that 70% of the universe is missing. 70% of the universe is not baryonic matter. It's dark matter and dark energy. Now, this in itself, and if you start taking figures down, the actual physical reality that we perceive, that we think is also important, is such a small percentage of what makes up the actual reality out there. You know, so there is something out there that we can't quantify. We call it dark matter and dark energy because we haven't got a clue what it is. But it's there. You know, the physical effects, the reason why galaxies are seen to spin in the way they do, implies that there is a lot more mass surrounding the galaxies than we can see, that we can perceive, or we can measure. And they just call it dark matter because they don't know any better. Now, I'm not one of these people that therefore, because science can't explain it at the moment, therefore I leap to massive conclusions about it. I never do that. What I'm turning around and saying is, we don't know what it is. So therefore, for the materialist to just turn around and say that we know everything there is to know about everything, it reminds me of 110 years ago when people were turning around, were almost in terms of understanding the whole of how the universe works. And then suddenly Max Planck came along with his explanation of the reason why Max Planck, when the ultraviolet catastrophe and the black body radiation came along, with a model that explained these black swans that they couldn't explain at the time by saying that energy was quantized. Now, nobody had thought about that. But as soon as he'd done it, it suddenly made us see reality in a different way. They're even arguing now that it is possible that gravity may be quantized, because the big question at the moment is that we have two forms of explanations of reality. We have the quantum explanation and we have the cosmological explanation. The problem is that they don't match. In other words, gravity cannot be explained by quantum events, and quantum events cannot be explained by macro science. So therefore, if we are looking for what Einstein termed the unified theory of everything, we can't, because we have massive contradictions. And the only way round it we can think of is that gravity itself, and which, by the way, if you speak to scientists will tell you that we know what gravity can do. We don't really understand how gravity really works, unless we take the Einsteinian point of view that space itself is curved and space is bent by the mass of objects around it. But for instance, one of the major problems they had was they couldn't understand how gravity acts instantaneously. For instance, if the sun disappeared tomorrow, everything the gravitational pull of the sun would disappear instantaneously everywhere. Well, everywhere across the universe, in effect, instantaneously. Now, that's impossible. And under modern viewpoints, that is impossible, because nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. So therefore, how would that happen? And again, it was a huge problem. They're looking for a particle called the graviton. And they think in many ways they may find gravitons in the Higgs boson, which is the thing they're looking for at the moment with the Large Hadron Collider. Because many people know about the Large Hadron Collider in Geneva, but they don't know what it's looking for. It's looking for something called the Higgs boson, which is the object that gives everything mass. They don't know. We look at objects and we know that they're heavy, we know that they have mass, but we don't know why they have mass. And most people you talk to will say, well, they just have. Why are these things of interest? Well, they're of interest because they come down to the reality of the realities, what it really is out there. And of course, there's the ultimate problem, what David Chalmers calls the hard problem, the Australian philosopher. And the hard problem is there is nowhere in our science at the moment that can explain consciousness. How you, dear, are listening to what I'm talking about, that you have memories, you have motivations, that you are a thinking being that has self-reflective consciousness in a universe that consists of things that are not conscious. In other words, we are made up of, as many people say, we're made up of star matter. We're made up of things that were ejected from supernova millions of years ago, billions of years ago. But all the bits and pieces of our body, when you break it down, are inanimate. They're not alive, but they pull together and they become organic compounds by some kind of magical thing. But these organic compounds are still non-sentient. But collectively you put them all together and suddenly by magic a conscious being appears. Where does it come from? You know, Chalmers has said this is the hard problem. easy is looking at the human brain as neurologists do to understand. Oh, there's that you look at the neurons of the brain and there's electrical sequences, and you take a PET scan and you can measure how the electrical sequences are when somebody sees something or they react and they show fear. That's the easy problem. The hard problem is, who is the thing that's feeling the fear? Who is the being in the head that's feeling the pain? Who's the being that feels guilt? For instance, pain. Pain doesn't. If every single sentient being was wiped out and every form of life was wiped out, where would pain be? Pain wouldn't exist. Pain exists because it's a perception. You can argue and say, oh, well, it's because it's a nerve impulse. That doesn't explain pain. It explains the nerve impulse. It doesn't explain the sensation of pain. I always say to people, why is pain painful? Why does it hurt? Because if you think about it, why should it hurt? What is it that makes something hurt? And then you have the mystery of emotional hurt. When we are hurt by somebody, what is that?
That's a deep question, Anthony. I'm sitting here listening to you. I'm like, oh my God, these are excellent questions. And since you brought that up, why, when you talk about pain and hurt, emotional pain and hurt, why is it that you feel it in your heart area? What is that about? What is that?
Why is that sudden pain in your heart? That the people have said for years, I have a broken heart. That's not poetic. That's something you actually physically feel. And again, I'd love a scientist to explain why that happens. In other words, my thoughts are non-physical, aren't they? They're non-physical. They're not there. They're not anywhere. They're non-physical. And yet, feeling something about, say, a hurt I gave somebody, or a pain I had, or the death of somebody I loved, you suddenly feel it in your heart. So a thought has created a physical effect. But is it a physical effect? Because that pain, again, in your heart is nowhere. Again, the pain is nowhere. The thing is that people turn around and say to me, oh, well, pain can be done away with. You take analgesics, you take painkillers, and the pain goes away. No, it doesn't. All that goes away is that the brain is into thinking it's not receiving the signal. The pain has not been taken away. The pain is still in your finger. Because when I was a kid, I used to think, if I take an aspirin, how does the aspirin know that I've got a pain in my finger? It doesn't cure the pain in the finger. It kicks in things within the neural networks of the brain. It affects the neurotransmitters in the brain to make us not feel the pain. It switches the pain off. And this again, this is the wonders of the brain. How do all these neurons collectively come together to create dear Nunez? That's all you are, your electrical impulses. But the electrical impulses could be taken away, but does that take dear Nunez away from the planet? When your brain ceases to function and the electrical impulses stop functioning in your brain, does that mean that dear goes away? Do you cease to exist?
Well, I can answer that question, and I can only speak for myself, and it's because of my spiritual grounding, if you will. The answer is absolutely unequivocally not. And I have proof of that. I'm not just saying, as I always say, and I say this many times on the H20 network, conceptualizing something is one thing, but to actually experience something is a completely different experience. And from the Dia Nunez's experience, I would have to say absolutely not. We do not cease to exist, because I've actually experienced a consciousness that is no longer here in the organic being, but it's somewhere. I've experienced that consciousness somewhere else. Now, my question is, what is this being that we're in? What is this? Okay, yeah, it's flesh. It's, like you said, electrical impulses. But the question that I want to know is, what is this organic being? What is this? I know that sounds, a bit nutty and crazy, but what is this vessel?
Well, it's a thing, isn't it? There's various thought exercises you can do that effectively, if you cut your arms off, they're not you. If you cut your head off, presumably you are inside your head. But as I say in my first book, the only reason we have a conception that we are our head is because our eyes and our ears and most of our sense devices are actually in our heads. But if you had eyes in your kneecap and you had ears at the side of your kneecap, we would have the sensation that we were somehow located in our knee. It's only because that's where we perceive the world. And all we are a perceiver that is somehow looking out of this kind of meat machine that we consider to be ourselves. But the meat machine itself is made of inorganic compounds that have come together to become an organism, an organic compounds. But effectively the life force, the elan vital, as they used to say, the thing that makes the body move, which has been the greatest mystery forever. You know, I know that I can move my hand. I give a thought and my hand moves across and picks something up. But they've actually found now with work this intention to move. The brain has already made the decision to move, or we are consciously aware of the fact that we've made the movement. You know, so clearly even the way we move is an ongoing mystery. You know, what is it that leaves the body the moment somebody dies? Suddenly from being a live, moving something, it becomes inanimate, nothing. I
got a better one for you, and I don't know why this popped into my head, but if maybe you know, we think of consciousness in the mind, but maybe our whole organic being is a consciousness slab, if you will. And the reason why I say this is because there are amputees who lose a limb. But if you talk to amputees, Anthony, they say that they can still feel that essence of the organic there. What is that? If the being is just, that's another thing. It's like a contradiction within a contradiction. If there is, if consciousness just exists in the projection of our mind, what's going on with the rest of the consciousness, with the rest of our body?
Yeah, well, the thing is, the point you say there are two points I'd make to that. The first one is, yes, the phantom limb concept, the idea that amputees still feel that their arm or their leg is still there. There's something called Karelian photography, which a Russian guy did, where he cut corners out of plants and things, and you could see the field where the body used to be. Now, I'm coming to the conclusion that consciousness itself is a field. It's a field concept. You know, we twig into the field of consciousness, and when we die, we move back into the field, back into the ocean, as it were. You know, that kind of thing. And I think this makes as much sense as any other materialistic description, because dualism is a problem. The idea of how inanimate and inanimate being, a soul that's inside the head, can motivate and make my body move. How can a thought, which is non-physical, bring about a physical movement in three-dimensional reality? It doesn't work.
Speechless.
All right, because I wondered whether I'd lost you again there.
No, I'm here. I'm just, I'm pondering what you said. I mean, these are like the $1 million questions of the universe. You know what I'm saying?
Totally, and they're questions that are so profoundly important to me. You know, I've spent my life wanting to know about these things. I regularly do a radio program on the BBC over here in the UK, and I get interviewed by a guy called Billy Butler, who's quite a local celebrity. And Billy keeps saying this to me, and he says, "Why do you think these things? How do you sleep at night? What you know, why?" And to me, these are the most important things. You know, the only thing I know with absolute certainty is that I am a sentient being that's perceiving the world. And I want to know why. I want to know why there is something rather than nothing. You know, the $1 million question, this was one of the great proofs of the existence of God in many years. It's the ontological argument, the idea that being, the very fact that there is something rather than nothing is proof that there is some kind of God out there. Now, I don't necessarily follow that argument particularly strongly. I think that was Leibniz, that came up with it. I think it was Leibniz, anyway. But the idea that, that there is, why is there something rather than nothing? And, more importantly, why consciousness anyway? Why should we be conscious? We could work just as well being what the philosophers call zombies. The idea that we could still exist and survive by not being conscious, by just reacting to the things around us. What is the advantage of being consciously aware unless there is a reason for our existence? And there's a reason why Radia exists, and there's a reason why Anthony exists, and we are part of a greater something. And we're not in a position to know the greater something because the part can never understand the whole, because we are not the whole, we are only a part.
Philosopher, man, you should. I'm sitting here listening to you, and I swear, twin souls, because I sit and I ponder these things as well. And it's because, like I told you on previous shows, I've had these ponderances where I'll be going about my mundane life, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, I'll have this epiphany, this realization. Is this a dream? What am I doing here? What's going on? It's like the strangest sensation that I've ever had, but I've been having them my whole life. So I know that what you're saying is very much important. There's more than just this mundane American Idol hoo-ha. There's a reason why we're here, and I'm like you. I want to know what's going down. Why are we here? Why are we consciousness? What is consciousness? And even more so, Anthony, and this may sound crazy but I think it's all connected, are we the only ones here? Internally and externally. I mean, what is the madness for all of this creation, if you will, this infinity? Is there someone else who looks like me, or a twin soul in another solar system sitting on another strange planet wondering the same things that I'm wondering? All of these things I ponder, so you're not crazy, because I think the same things.
I think there are many of us out there. Indeed, I have a group of people we meet in Liverpool called the Walker Group, and we were discussing this very thing. What is it that makes us groups come together like ours? And it's because there are certain people who really don't want to know. They're not really interested. They don't see the mystery of life because it just is. To them, it just is. It is self-evident because it just is. And there are other people that think, well, no, it's strange, it's curious. Now, it could be we're wrong. It could be that we are being naive. It could be that we are the ones that really just cannot accept that all we are strings of DNA. We're linked in a DNA chain. And that's all we are. As Richard Dawkins would say, we're effectively vessels for the selfish gene. It's the genes that are the immortal beings that carry on through, and they just use us to guarantee their own immortality. But there is another argument to say that if that was the case again, self-conscious awareness wouldn't be needed. So there is a certain degree, and what was the point of having a being that feels emotional pain? It doesn't make it more effective. I would say an organism would be much more effective, and human beings would be much more effective as evolutionary beings if they didn't feel pain and remorse. And because there is the argument to say that we have to, because it keeps our social units together, which is, again, another interesting point. But it could be that, am I thinking I'm far more important than I am? Because a lot of people would argue that we are trying to aggrandize ourselves because we think we are far more important than we are, and in fact we're not. But I genuinely, in my heart, there's just this kind of instinctive feeling. And as I've got older, this feeling has got stronger and stronger. But in fact, what we are important.
Indeed. No, I completely agree with you on that. And there's one thing that I've also pondered, and I don't know if you pondered this, but if we only use a certain percentage of our brain, why isn't our brain smaller, and why do we have this projector that's so big that's untapped into? And how can we tap into it? It's very important. I've always wanted to know this. And I would say things to people like, honey, if we could use just even 5% more of our brain capacity, we'd be able to fly. We'd be able to do like things that we call superhuman or science fiction, if you will. But I know, Anthony, that the powers that be, if you will, are very much interested in this. They're interested. I think that there are things going on. That's why I said there are so many different realities layered on top of each other that are mundane and non-mundane that some people, like you said, will never accept because they just want to be in the illusion and things of this nature. But, you know, the government, I don't know what I was doing as far as research, but I just happened to stumble upon this institute who's actually investigating teleportation and all of these things that's connected with the government, and I was like, wow. So there are so many secrets that have been kept when it comes to the area of consciousness, the concept of what we think is supernatural and, you know, science fiction. As my grandmother says, there's a lot of fact of fiction, and we're about to get a big surprise. I don't know why I say this, but I just feel like our reality and our perception of it is really about to get tested, and some people are not going to be ready for that.
I know. Well, funnily enough, I probably mentioned I've been offered a research fellowship at the Global Shift University, which has been set up by Professor Irvin Laszlo, and that's what this is all about. You know, it's the idea that we want to build up a global shift. You know, if more and more people start to be thinking in a scientific way as well as in a spiritual way, because there is this bizarre thing that you can't be scientific and spiritual. You can be spiritual. You may not be this, which is a different term altogether. You know, being spiritual is not being doctrinaire. It's not. It's looking at the wonderment of what it is to exist. You know, and those links can be made, and I think it's important because that's part of being human. You know, there is a great mystery, there is a groundswell, and I just feel at the moment we're coming to this. But then again, I bet you every single generation has always thought this, that we're in the times when there's going to be crucial change. But I think for the first time in the history of humanity, we are in the position where we can destroy the planet in so many different ways. And the planet might decide to destroy us. You know, I think James Lovelock and his concept of the Gaia,
yeah,
and the idea that the planet is a live organism, and effectively we're like a virus on this organism, and either we work with the greater organism that we exist within, or it will kill us, it will get rid of us, because it has to, you know, because we're such a danger to everything else on the planet. But as you say, even thinking along the planetary ideas, you know, you've just got to look at the deep space photographs that are coming out now with the new space station telescopes that they've got out there. You know, to see some of these photographs of deep space, you know, in one picture you can see literally millions upon millions of galaxies going on into infinity. You know, the idea, the vastness of space is so huge that it beggars description, and it seems even bigger. And then if we bring in the multiverses and everything else as well, what does that say? We are infinitesimally inconsequential, or we might be the most beings ever. Because who's to know? Life had to have started on one planet somewhere and then spread out. Or it could start in different planets in different ways. But say just for one thought that this is the first planet that life has existed on, and everything depends upon life on this planet, and we might wipe it out. What a responsibility that is.
But the question is, Anthony, one has to ask themselves, after you stated that picture with all the galaxies, are we really the only ones where life exists?
Clearly not. And I think I also argue, in my next book I will be arguing this, that look is looking in as well. You know, so in other words, it's like a huge set of Russian dolls, or like a mirror reflected in a mirror. Effectively, the massively huge is the infinitely small. And we contain, as William Blake said, to see heaven in a wild flower. The idea is that I believe that the teardrop is the universe is contained. And within that teardrop is contained the person shedding the tear. And then there's another person shedding a tear within that teardrop. And I think when you look at holograms, the holograms are telling the message. It's something that David Bohm, the famous philosopher-physicist, said when he came up with his model, which was called the implicate order. He said there are two orders. There's the explicate order, which is everything we perceive, but this is built upon something called the implicate order, which is the reality within the reality. And that reality is holographic. And indeed, you know, we are all part of a greater something. Holism is the way forward. We are just teardrops in an ocean. Teardrops, I keep using in that term today. I must be feeling particularly poetic, I think. I don't know. It must be Friday afternoon, I think.
Indeed. No, there's just so many mysteries to the universe. And like I said, there are many things being revealed to humanity, whether we want to accept them or not. It's what it is. And not just the things, if you will, concepts of consciousness, but beings, and that we're not even the only ones here, if you will. And I know that may sound strange, but I believe that it's all connected. There's some, I feel like there's a great alignment that's not just happening with planet Earth, but within the whole galaxy and universe within itself. Everything is shifting. And with that shift, there's got to be a shift of perception in the same breath. Very, very fascinating, to say the least.
Absolutely. We do live in exciting times, and we are at the vanguard of it, we would like to believe. But at the moment, it does seem that we are fortunate to be in this position to be able to be discussing these things and exercising our brain muscles, which again is a contradiction in terms. But effectively, you know, just being able to think about these things. And I just love it. I just love discussing these ideas and these thoughts.
Absolutely, I do as well. There's so many questions, but as they say, time will most definitely tell, especially when it comes to this phenomenon of 11/11. It's going to be interesting to see as time progresses what is going to unfold within man and with the environment and things of this nature, because clearly there's something going on. And as I was saying to one of my elders the other day, I'm tapped into nature. I'm an indigenous practitioner, and if you're tapped into nature, you can't help but to feel what's going on. If you're a spiritual person and you know that, and you say in one breath that we're all connected, there is something there. There is something happening that is undescribable. There are many things that are opening up on the forefront, many different phenomenons that are happening to people. Their daemons, as you said, are revealing themselves to the original human being in giving messages, if you will. And we really, I think Anthony, it would behoove us to pay attention. And I know that we live in a very pessimistic world and la-di-da, but this phenomenon here is just, it's too large in scope. I mean, it's just way too big in scope. Too many people experiencing the same thing. There's something to that.
Yeah, I'd agree. I would agree that there does seem to be a groundswell of need to understand these things more. And, you know, one of the things that I'm trying to do is to network with people across the world. And one of the things I've suggested is that it would be great if we could set up walker groups like the one I had in Liverpool in all the major cities in the world, where people will be talking and discussing these ideas and these thoughts in a day. And who knows, we might build what the mystics would call an egregore, you know, kind of a collective consciousness which is greater than the individuals involved, because times they are changing, and we do need to be very much aware of this.
Indeed, we do. And, you know, since you said that, I saw you post that on your Facebook. It would be very fascinating to see if this will work, because, you know, I'm always open to new things. But next time you have your walker group, if possibly I can tap in through the genre of Skype just to hear the conversation and to bring this forward and maybe participate via technology and to see New York City area if people are interested in that because I just think that it's very much important. We need to tap into these energies, what's going on, and we need to not figure out because there are just certain things that one just will never know. You may get a piece of the puzzle, but sometimes it's always hard to nail it down. But to be able to talk about these things is important. So maybe we can work that out and see if it will be a possibility because I'm very fascinated and I would love to be able to come to England, to be able to participate actually in person and see how we can expand this and get people talking about consciousness. It's very much important. There's so many more things that exist in this reality besides the mundane and going to work and feeding your kids and worrying about their college education. There's more to life than just that. This cannot be the only thing that exists. It just can't be. I can't accept it.
No. Well, one of the things when, one of your future guests, when you have Professor Laszlo on, which is going to be a wonderful show for you, I think it would be wonderful, being able to chat to him, it is the point that he's very much of this ilk as well, and I know that with his Global Shift University, that this is what he's trying to do. He's trying to link people around the world, and if he can do this, we are flying. We are definitely flying.
Absolutely. Well, I told Nicoletta Christie, who is working with Dr. Laszlo as well, that the H20 network is open to all individuals who are tapping into that frequency. We are here. We are about collaboration because it's very much important, like you said. We have to get on the ball. We have to start paying attention because, to be quite honest, and I'm stating it plain, if we don't get out of this cave of illusion, we're going to end up destroying ourselves. And that's just the bottom line. I'm not apocalyptic by any nature, but you know what? Man's ego will destroy the planet and everything else on it. So if we don't start walking in a different type of frequency and a way and how we treat each other and things of this nature, we're in a heap of trouble. That's just what I see.
We certainly are. We certainly are.
Time goes by so quick, Anthony. Please give everyone your information so they can get in contact with you.
Okay, there's two avenues of contact. You can contact me via my website, which is anthonypeake.com, and on there I have a forum, which is anthonypeake.com/forum. I'm also very active on Facebook, and I'm on Facebook as Anthony Peake, as I know you are and a lot of other individuals are. So please join in, get involved in it all, and let's see if we can be a force for good, and let's see if we can be a force for change. And again, I'd like to thank you, Radia, for allowing me on your airwaves as well. I'm forever grateful for you to giving me the opportunity to talk to your listeners over there in the USA and across the world as well. And just say thanks very much for listening in again. And presumably as well, this will be available to listen again in due course as well if people want to, dear?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay, well, what I'd suggest you do, again, if you can put that up on Facebook for the individuals that may have missed it, because this has been another cracking discussion. I could talk to you for hours.
Are you kidding me? All I need is some tea and some biscuits, and we could talk for hours. And let me tell you, Anthony, when I finally come to England, you and your wife better get ready because because I'm going to be keeping you up. So make sure that you guys get your sleep.
We certainly will. We certainly will. I'll tell her that. Okay, Radia. Thanks very much again.
Thank you. Sending a lot of love. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, see ya. Bye.
Bye. Once again, family, an awesome show. I love Anthony Peake. When I tell you, I so look forward to having these consciousness conversations, if you will, with Anthony Peake. He is a brilliant writer and researcher, and he is working with, as we were talking about previously, Erwin Laszlo, who, by the way, was the nominee for a Nobel Peace Prize, yes, in Italy. Very, very intelligent human being. And Anthony actually is doing a fellowship with him. So he's just doing so many things on the burner. And we're going to have Dr. Laszlo on the H20 network next month. I am so excited. So you guys most definitely have got to tune into that because that's going to be very interesting. I love talking about consciousness. We are so much more, family. Excuse me. We are so much more than these flesh suits. And even the flesh suit is very intriguing. There's so many things, so many mysteries that are just unanswered. And I can't even get it out. But there's so many mysteries that I love to talk about when it comes to that. There's so much more to life than what we think, and so much potentiality to that. So many tools that we're not using, we're not utilizing. And that's why I love to talk about it. Consciousness, dreaming, astral travel, all of these things, because these are spiritual tools that we come to the planet with. They're tools that can actually help us evolve in many, many different ways and forms, help us change our perspective on things. How great is that? But we have to be able to tap into these things, talk about them, talk about the mysteries, go beyond the fear, unindoctrinate ourselves from what the secular has taught us. Because when we are children, the true alchemists of reality, we were explorers and doing all kinds of wonderful things, but unfortunately when we come into a certain frame of being, we're told that all of these things are wrong, that our imagination is not a good thing to fantasize, to imagine, when in fact reality that we see, the mundane, is built upon the power of imagining, the alchemy of the imagination. Very much important. We have to bring these things back. They can really, I perceive anyway, and everyone has a different opinion about this, but they can really help in the evolution of your spiritual self. You are already spiritual when you come to the planet, if you will. You cannot not be something that you already are. But we are born into this world forgetful and not knowing. So it is our responsibility as human beings to awaken that, to awaken the greatness, because we are more than what we perceive ourselves to be. As I say, family, awesome, awesome time. I love spending time with you, always. I hope that everyone has a beautiful weekend, a beautiful Friday. Know that you are more, so much more than what you perceive yourself to be. The potentiality that lies within your being, the seeds that lay dormant are so great. You're so much more. So much more. And as I always say, be happy and live happy. And until next time, family, bye-bye.
I brought you something close to me, left with something new, see through your hair. You haunt my dreams, there's nothing to do but